What happens when the lines between justice and desire blur? When a man in power succumbs to a temptation he should have never touched, and the cost is far more than just his reputation. This isn't just a story about prison walls and iron bars. This is about a secret, so dangerous, so destructive, it shattered lives from the inside out. A love affair that never should have happened. A hidden truth that spread like poison. And a murder that no one saw coming. At the center of it all is Warden Merritt Caldwell, respected, disciplined, untouchable. A man known for his strict rulebook and his unwavering dedication to the institution he ran. But behind that polished uniform and stern glare, was a weakness. A fatal one. Her name was Fletcher Keddy. Inmate number 871042. A woman sentenced to years behind bars for crimes she refused to speak of, with eyes that told stories no file ever could. She was clever. Manipulative. Beautiful. And she knew exactly how to play the game. It started with glances. Lingering conversations. A sense of danger that clung to the air whenever she entered his office. He knew better. He swore he'd never cross that line. But slowly, night after night, something shifted. And once that first touch happened, there was no turning back. The affair was secret. Passionate. Reckless. And it didn't take long before it spiraled into something darker than either of them could control. Because Fletcher wasn't just hiding her feelings, she was hiding a deadly truth. HIV. Whether it was revenge, recklessness, or something far more sinister, she never told him. Not until it was too late. And when the truth surfaced, when Warden Caldwell realized the woman he had fallen for had infected him with a death sentence, everything changed. What followed wasn't just scandal. It was rage. Betrayal. And a murder that left everyone asking the same question: who was the real victim? This is the story of a prison affair that turned deadly. A warden's fall from grace. And the chilling events that still leave people wondering, was it love, or was it a setup from the very beginning? Before the blood. Before the betrayal. Before the headlines screamed, "Warden infected. Warden dead." There were two lives, on separate paths, slowly, dangerously converging. Let's start with him. Merritt Caldwell. Age 43. A decorated Marine veteran turned correctional officer. After 2 decades of slow, grueling work in the state prison system, he had finally clawed his way to the top. Appointed warden at Black Ridge Correctional Facility, a maximum security prison buried deep in the outskirts of West Texas, he was the kind of man the state trusted to keep order where chaos thrived. On paper, Merritt was everything a warden should be: disciplined, cold, methodical. He ran Black Ridge like a fortress. No bending of rules. No favors. No second chances. He kept his staff in line, his inmates under control, and his emotions locked in a vault. But that was the exterior. Behind closed doors, Merritt's life was quietly unraveling. A marriage stretched thin. A wife, Melissa, who had grown distant, tired of his long nights and short words. 2 kids, barely speaking to him, resentful of the man who was never really home. There were whispers of infidelity. A car that stayed in the driveway too long. Late-night phone calls that ended the moment he walked in the room. Merritt felt it. The silence. The emptiness. At work, he was feared. At home, he was forgotten. And maybe that's why, when Fletcher Keddy entered his prison, something inside him stirred. Something he hadn't felt in years. Now her. Fletcher Keddy. Age 29. Arrested on multiple counts of grand larceny, fraud, and suspected of assisting in an armed robbery that left a store clerk hospitalized. But no one could ever prove the latter. She walked into Black Ridge like a ghost from another life, tattoos, a crooked smile, and a past nobody could pin down. Born in Memphis, Tennessee. Raised by a mother who worked nights and a father who disappeared before she turned 8. Fletcher bounced through foster homes, juvenile centers, and the streets. By 15, she was running credit card scams. By 20, she was living with a man twice her age who taught her how to con, charm, and vanish. She was a survivor. A chameleon. And above all, she was a reader of people. She didn't just walk into a room. She studied it. And when she saw Warden Caldwell the first time, she saw opportunity. At first, she was just another inmate. But then came the conversations. She volunteered for every library shift, every kitchen duty, every minor infraction that might put her on Caldwell's radar. She left him notes, clever ones, disguised in bureaucratic language. She made him laugh. Disarmed him. Got under his skin. And slowly, it worked. Merritt knew she was dangerous. He saw the red flags. The way she looked at him too long. The way her file never quite matched the version of her he met face to face. But in those moments, when the prison was quiet and the lights dimmed, she made him feel seen. Important. Desired. For a man starving for affection, Fletcher wasn't just a temptation. She was oxygen. Staff started to whisper. There were unexplained late-night rounds. Conversations in locked offices. Inmates joked about how Fletcher always seemed to get the easier assignments. A female guard once filed a report about inappropriate familiarity between the warden and Ketty. It was buried. Dismissed as gossip. But the truth was, the line had already been crossed. They were lovers. In a place built to keep people apart, they had found each other. But what Merritt didn't know, what Fletcher never told him, was that long before he touched her, she had already been carrying a secret. A medical file sealed during her intake screening. A blood test flagged and forgotten. She was HIV positive. Whether she knew all along, whether she meant to infect him, or whether it was some act of twisted love or vengeance, that's the question that haunts this case. But one thing is certain, there were signs. Red flags waving in the wind, ignored by a man who should have known better. A staff member caught Fletcher using a restricted phone, days before the incident. Another said she overheard a conversation about a reckoning. Merritt himself became more withdrawn. Irritable. Distracted. He was losing weight. Sleeping in his office. Staring at his reflection like he didn't recognize the man looking back. And then, came the revelation. A hospital visit. A routine check. The diagnosis, HIV positive. The warden, shocked. Betrayed. Unraveling. Witnesses say that night, he didn't go home. He went back to the prison. And something snapped. The night of October 17th was colder than usual for that part of Texas. A dry wind blew across the rusting fences of Black Ridge Correctional Facility, carrying with it the scent of something brewing, something not just foul, but final. At 2:13 a.m., a correctional officer on shift change noticed something off. The warden's private office door, normally locked tight after hours, was ajar. A soft light spilled out onto the hallway floor. There was no sound inside. No movement. Just a strange, heavy silence. When Officer Daniel Trevor stepped in, he stopped breathing. There, slumped against the far wall, behind the blood-splattered desk, was Warden Merritt Caldwell. Pale. Lifeless. Eyes wide open. A crimson halo pooled beneath his skull. The back of his head blown open. A .38 caliber revolver lying loosely in his open hand. To anyone who first saw the scene, it was obvious. Suicide. A man broken by secrets. A final, desperate escape. But nothing at Black Ridge was ever that simple. Within the hour, the facility was in lockdown. By sunrise, Texas Rangers and state investigators flooded the scene. The staff was sequestered. Inmates were confined to their cells. The revolver was bagged. The office photographed from every angle. And within those photos, was doubt. The gun, for one, had no blood spatter on its grip. The trajectory of the bullet didn't quite match a typical self-inflicted shot. And most curious of all, there was no gunshot residue on Caldwell's hand. The medical examiner confirmed it within 48 hours, Merritt Caldwell did not kill himself. He was murdered. Shot execution style. The killer placed the gun in his hand after the fact. Someone wanted it to look like suicide. Someone almost got away with it. Once the case shifted to homicide, the full weight of the law descended on Blackridge. Every staff member and inmate was questioned. Security footage was combed through frame by frame. But something was wrong. The cameras in the admin wing, where the warden's office was located, had suffered a technical glitch that night. 2 hours of corrupted footage. A blackout, conveniently timed between 1 o'clock and 3 a.m. Sabotage? Or coincidence? Investigators suspected inside help. Possibly someone on staff. But then came the whispers. The gossip that had circulated for months, dismissed as prison rumors. The warden, and an inmate. The name dropped again and again, Fletcher Ketty. Guards recalled late-night visits. Disciplinary reports mysteriously disappearing. One staff member finally cracked, off the record, claiming they once saw Fletcher inside the warden's office after lockdown, fully dressed, hair neatly done, no escort in sight. That was enough. Fletcher was removed from general population, placed in solitary confinement, and flagged for questioning. They brought her in, hands cuffed, face unreadable. No tears. No trembling. Just that same calm, calculated stillness. The lead detective leaned in. We know about the relationship. We know he tested positive. And we know he didn't shoot himself. Fletcher didn't blink. Warden Caldwell, she said slowly, was a very complicated man. The detective pushed. Did you kill him? She smiled. You'll have to be more specific. Physically? Or emotionally? They had no confession. But they had motive. And soon, they had more. A lab report revealed partial fingerprints on the gun, not just Merritt's, but another set, smudged, but female. A DNA match confirmed it. Fletcher Ketty's prints were on the weapon. But how did she get access to a locked office? That's when they discovered the master key card, missing for weeks. Found in the laundry room ventilation shaft, wrapped in a torn bedsheet, fingerprints wiped clean. A deep dive into prison logs showed Fletcher had been assigned to janitorial duty the week prior. Access to admin alone. And then came the most damning piece of evidence, a torn page from Merritt's private medical file, stuffed behind a ceiling tile in the chapel. The report showing his HIV-positive status. The date on it, just 2 weeks before his death. The page had a handwritten note at the bottom, she knew. And now I know too. As soon as the news broke, the media had a feeding frenzy. Prison love affair turns deadly. Inmate infects warden with HIV, allegedly kills him in revenge plot. Texas tragedy, power, passion, and betrayal behind bars. Reporters camped outside Blackridge for days. The public demanded answers. Prison reform activists blamed administrative negligence. The warden's wife, Melissa Caldwell, went on live television and broke down in tears. He was a good man, she sobbed. He made mistakes, but he didn't deserve this. Some believed Fletcher killed Merritt in cold blood, either in revenge for the discovery, or to silence him before he turned her in. Others believed it was a mutual suicide pact gone wrong. And a darker theory emerged, that Merritt, already unraveling from the diagnosis, had confronted Fletcher in a moment of rage, and she defended herself. Or worse, that someone else entirely staged the scene, using their affair as cover. But one fact remained constant: the truth was buried under layers of lies, sex, betrayal, and silence. Fletcher Ketty was no stranger to cold stares, judgmental whispers, or the sound of steel doors locking behind her. But nothing prepared her for the weight of that morning, when two officers opened her solitary cell and told her she was being moved, not to another block, but to county jail. October 31st, ironically Halloween, the day the mask officially came off. With chains at her wrists and ankles, Fletcher stepped out into the sunlight, squinting for the first time in nearly 2 weeks. A media circus awaited her outside the facility gates. Cameras clicked. Microphones extended. Journalists shouted questions. Did you kill the warden? Were you lovers? Is it true you gave him HIV? She said nothing. Just stared ahead, lips pressed into a quiet, unreadable smirk. To some, it looked like arrogance. To others, survival. That evening, the Travis County District Attorney's Office filed formal charges: first-degree murder, possession of a prohibited item in a correctional facility, firearm, tampering with evidence, aggravated assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm, HIV transmission. The DA made it clear, they believed Fletcher lured Merritt Caldwell into a long-term sexual affair, withheld her HIV status, and ultimately murdered him when he tried to end things and come clean. Prosecutor Angela Ruiz, known for her relentless style and near-perfect conviction rate, stood before the cameras and declared, "This case is not just about betrayal. It's about premeditation, manipulation, and murder inside a place meant to uphold the law." No one is above accountability, not even behind bars. But Fletcher wasn't alone. Her public defender, Tobias Quinn, wasn't what anyone expected. A Harvard-educated, fast-talking courtroom tactician, Quinn was known for taking impossible cases and flipping them on their heads. And this time, he saw something different in Fletcher's file, a chance to expose a bigger truth. "She's not the villain here," he told the court. "She's the scapegoat." Quinn argued that Fletcher's sexual relationship with Merritt Caldwell wasn't manipulation. It was grooming. A desperate inmate falling prey to a powerful man in a position of unchecked authority. He gave her privileges. He protected her record. He isolated her from other staff. That's not love, it's control. As for the murder, where's the video evidence? Where's the gunshot residue on her clothes? All we have are coincidences and a broken man's secrets. The pre-trial hearings were explosive. Quinn demanded access to Caldwell's private communications, emails, handwritten letters, confiscated cell phones, claiming they would prove Fletcher had tried to end the affair, not Merritt. The prosecution, meanwhile, introduced a new forensic report: trace amounts of blood under Fletcher's fingernails the night of the murder. Blood that matched Caldwell's DNA. But Quinn flipped that too. Of course there's blood. She found him dying. She touched him. She panicked. The courtroom was divided. The prosecution painted her as a manipulative predator who seduced a man of power, poisoned him, literally, with HIV, and then shot him when he couldn't take it anymore. The defense countered with a narrative of institutional abuse, that Fletcher was targeted, used, and abandoned, only to be framed when things spiraled out of control. TV networks ran primetime specials titled Warden's Weakness and Deadly Attraction, the prison affair that turned fatal. Public opinion split like wildfire. Victims' rights advocates called for harsher penalties for inmates who conceal medical status. Prison reformers, on the other hand, accused Blackridge officials of fostering a culture of secrecy and exploitation. On social media, #FreeFletcher trended for a week straight, fueled by amateur sleuths, TikTok conspiracy theories, and prison rights influencers. But the most damning twist came from a leaked jailhouse recording, a call Fletcher made to her estranged half-sister 2 days after the murder. Her voice, quiet but chilling: "He said he loved me. Then he said I ruined his life. I didn't ruin anything. He just didn't know how to live with who he was." The prosecution seized on it. This is guilt. This is motive. This is her confession. The defense fought to have it suppressed, arguing it was illegally recorded without consent. The judge allowed it, in part. Just when it seemed like the trial was heading toward an inevitable conviction, a shocking discovery changed everything. The defense found a journal, not Fletcher's, but Merritt's. Pages torn, ink smeared, but clear enough to reveal months of emotional torment. Regret. Confusion. Love. And this entry, dated 4 days before his death, she told me she was positive. I didn't believe her. I thought it was a test, some kind of punishment. Now. I've seen the report. She tried to tell me. I didn't listen. This shifted the narrative. Did Merritt spiral into self-destruction? Did he stage the encounter? Invite her in, provoke her, push her to the edge? Or, did someone else find out about the affair and take justice into their own hands? New rumors surfaced. A fellow correctional officer, Ethan Marks, was briefly detained after it was revealed he had made anonymous complaints about Caldwell's favoritism toward Fletcher. Marks allegedly said, "If someone doesn't put a stop to this, that inmate's gonna destroy this whole place." But with no hard evidence tying him to the scene, the lead faded. Still, doubt had been planted. Jurors whispered. Reporters speculated. The case was no longer black and white. It was gray. Deep, dirty gray. As the trial pushed toward closing arguments, the public sat on edge. Was Fletcher Ketty a heartless killer who seduced a man and then silenced him? Or was she a product of a broken system, a woman pushed to the edge by abuse and betrayal? One thing was clear, this wasn't just a case about murder. It was a case about power, sex, disease, and the invisible lines people cross when no one is watching. The trial of Fletcher Ketty vs. the state of Texas began on a cold January morning. Reporters camped outside the courthouse. National outlets were now covering the case, dubbing it the prison seductress trial, a name Fletcher would later say cut deeper than the chains ever did. Inside courtroom 2B, the air was thick with tension. Rows of observers filled every seat, some from advocacy groups, others simply true crime junkies with front-row fascination. But at the heart of it all sat one woman, handcuffed at the waist, head held high, defiant in the face of judgment. Jury selection took 5 grueling days. The defense struck down anyone who showed bias toward prison staff or had family in law enforcement. The prosecution eliminated anyone who followed #FreeFletcher on social media. By day 6, 12 jurors were sworn in, and the real battle began. Prosecutor Angela Ruiz opened with a chilling statement: he was a husband. A father. A public servant. He wasn't perfect. But he didn't deserve to die in the prison he protected. And he certainly didn't deserve to be infected, betrayed, and executed by someone he trusted. Ruiz laid it out plainly: this wasn't a story of forbidden love, it was a murder masked by manipulation, an inmate who used her body as a weapon, and a man who paid for it with his life. Defense attorney Tobias Quinn followed with a bombshell of his own: this case is not about love. It's about power. About what happens when a man with a badge and a key steps into the shadows with a vulnerable inmate and thinks no one will ever know. Until he ends up dead, and everyone scrambles for someone to blame. And just like that, the stage was set. 2 narratives. 1 courtroom. And no room for mercy. The first to take the stand, Warden Merritt Caldwell's widow, Caroline. Her voice trembled as she described her husband's mental unraveling in the final months. He'd come home late. Distant. Lost. I thought he was having a breakdown. I didn't know he was having an affair with a prisoner. She wept, but when asked if she believed Fletcher killed him, she paused, then said, "I don't know who she is. But I know my husband. And if he died in that room with her, he let her in." That hesitation. It didn't go unnoticed. Next came the prison nurse, who had once treated Fletcher's HIV diagnosis. She confirmed that Fletcher had been warned, twice, about disclosing her status to sexual partners. The prosecution seized on this. She knew. She didn't tell him. That's not negligence. That's assault. But then came the twist. The defense called a surprise witness, an inmate named Cora Nunez, once in the same block as Fletcher. Cora took the stand and said this: "I saw them. Him and her. In the chapel. In the laundry room. This wasn't one-sided. He was obsessed. Bought her books. Left her gifts. Said she made him feel alive again." The courtroom gasped. Angela Ruiz objected furiously, but the judge allowed it. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. Fletcher wasn't a femme fatale. She was an inmate being groomed. Then came the biggest blow of the trial, Merritt Caldwell's private journal. The defense read select entries aloud. She said she had it. "I thought it was a lie. But now, I can't breathe. I don't know who I am anymore." I told her it was over. She said okay. She just walked away. That silence, it scared me. Maybe this ends with me. Maybe that's better. Ruiz tried to argue the entries were ambiguous. But jurors were already leaning forward, wide-eyed. Was this a confession of guilt? A suicide note written in slow motion? Or just the unraveling of a man too deep in his own lies? Angela Ruiz painted the story in blood and betrayal. She infected him. She used him. And when the fairy tale ended, she pulled the trigger. She walked to the jury, voice calm but sharp. Actions have consequences. He's in the ground. She was in his bed. You connect the dots. Then Tobias Quinn rose for the final time. "I'm not asking you to excuse her. I'm asking you to see her. See the system that failed her. See the man who broke every oath he took, and then tried to hide it with shame and secrets." He paused. She didn't kill him. His guilt did. After 10 days of testimony and 30 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. Everyone in the room held their breath. Judge Morales looked down as the foreman handed over the slip of paper. 1 count of murder in the first degree, not guilty. Gasps. Murmurs. Tears. On the charge of aggravated assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm, guilty. Fletcher blinked. On the charge of bringing a firearm into a correctional facility, guilty. And with that, the sentence was handed down: 12 years for assault, 8 years for weapons charge, time served credited as 2 years. She would serve an additional 18 years, eligible for parole in 9. The courtroom exploded with mixed emotions. Caroline Caldwell left without speaking to the press. Ruiz called the verdict a failure of justice, but a reflection of a broken system. Quinn, outside the courthouse, said only, "She was used. She was punished. But she's still standing. That's what matters." On social media, hashtags changed overnight. Hashtag justice for Merritt, hashtag Fletcher was failed, hashtag the prison system exposed. Some believed she got away with murder. Others believed she never should have been locked up to begin with. One thing was certain: the truth would always be tangled in shadows. Because in this story, there were no heroes. Only wounds. Only scars. And one prison affair that left blood on everyone's hands. As the dust settled in the courtroom, the ripples of Fletcher Keddy's death, and the subsequent trial, stretched far beyond those 4 walls. Where are they now? Let's start with Fletcher Keddy. His legacy was not just one of a warden's tragic death, but one of the questions he left unanswered. In the years since his passing, the Keddy family, his wife, Caroline, and their 2 children, have kept a low profile, quietly leaving the media circus behind. It's said that Caroline found solace in moving away from Texas, seeking a life untouched by the dark cloud of public scandal. But her silence doesn't mean peace. In interviews that never aired, she spoke about the pain of knowing her husband's final moments were shared with someone who held nothing but contempt for his betrayal, yet still, part of her couldn't reconcile the fact that he had crossed a line that neither her family nor anyone would ever forgive. As for Fletcher himself, his name became synonymous with a tragic spiral of lost moral boundaries. His funeral, which initially saw a few dozen attendees, later became a symbol of the very system he had sworn to protect, and many wondered how much of his own guilt had festered quietly until the end. Public sentiment towards him shifted, from one of sympathy to a broader questioning of the moral lines prison staff could walk without consequences. After the trial, Maria went from being a convicted murderer with a questionable past to someone who faced not only her own guilt but the responsibility for the lives she altered. While she served her sentence in Texas, Maria's journey into the harsh realities of prison life was far more complicated than anticipated. Prison guards, fellow inmates, and the media regularly found themselves speculating about the price she would have to pay, but some found themselves at a loss. Was Maria the victim of a broken system that empowered men like Fletcher to behave as if they were above the law? Or was she an accomplice in a crime that transcended her own survival instincts? After the trial, Maria's appeal was filed, questioning the integrity of her conviction. Her defense team argued she had been a victim of manipulation and coercion, that she hadn't known the full impact of her actions. They questioned the ethics of prison guards and their ability to prey on vulnerable women, questioning the level of control Fletcher had over her emotions and choices. Yet, in the end, the appeal was denied, and Maria's sentence remained as it was, reducing her hopes of ever seeing the outside world again anytime soon. While some supported Maria, citing the power dynamics that often flourish behind prison walls, others saw her only as a woman who had used a vulnerable man for her own benefit. The case became a textbook example for prison reform advocates, who pointed to the glaring flaws in the correctional system. It led to a complete overhaul of policies related to inmate-staff relationships, with new laws passed to ensure greater transparency and accountability in prisons across the country. Mandatory psychological evaluations for staff who had access to inmates became standard protocol, and a multi-year push was put into motion to overhaul training programs meant to address the human needs of corrections officers, training that, prior to the incident, had overlooked potential emotional or physical exploitation. Yet, despite the reforms, many felt the new policies didn't go far enough. Many continued to argue that prison culture still allowed for unchecked abuses of power. The case fueled debates about gender inequality in the system, and how female inmates are often subjected to the whims of powerful men in positions of authority. Did Maria deserve the heavy sentence she received? Did she kill Fletcher? Or was he the architect of his own demise, navigating the labyrinth of lies, deceit, and manipulation that grew between them? Her defense attorney, Tobias Quinn, refused to back down in the years after the verdict. In an exclusive interview on the anniversary of the trial, he stated, "What happened in that prison wasn't just about love gone wrong. It was about a man who held power, a man who thought he was untouchable. He took advantage of someone who was trapped, someone who had nowhere to go. She made mistakes, horrible ones, but so did he." And the real question is, who was actually punished the most here? The case remains, to this day, a haunting reminder of the darkness that exists behind prison walls, and the complex dynamics between power, vulnerability, and control. But as time moves on, the true question becomes harder to answer: the prisoner with HIV or the warden who never saw the end coming? Was it Maria, who lived a life marked by abandonment and emotional hardship? Or was it Fletcher, who crossed the line and paid for it with his life? And how much responsibility lies within the system itself? In the end, the answers may never be clear. But one thing is certain: there are no true winners in this story. Only lives destroyed. And scars that will never fully heal. As you walk away from this case, ask yourself, how far can a man or a woman be pushed before they're willing to cross lines they never thought possible? What is the cost of betrayal when power is the most precious commodity in the world? The truth, like the shadows in this story, is hard to find. But in the murky depths of human nature, one thing remains undeniably clear: betrayal cuts deep, and sometimes, the deepest cuts are the ones no one can see. That's where we leave this story for now, but the whispers of this case will echo long after the final gavel falls. Before you go, let me ask you something. If you've made it this far, if you've felt the weight of this tragic story and the deep emotional turmoil it left in its wake, then you can understand the importance of sharing stories that matter. Stories like this need to be heard. So, why not show your support? It doesn't cost you anything, but for those of us sharing these real, raw, and unforgettable moments, it means the world. A simple like and subscribe can help us keep going, uncovering more stories, more mysteries, and more truth. But think about this. If you've stayed this long, if you've felt the impact of this video, can you truly leave without doing something? Something as simple as clicking that subscribe button. Because the next story might be even more important. So, please, don't just walk away. Your support isn't just appreciated, it's needed. For the victims, for the truth, and for the stories yet to come. Like, subscribe, and join us in uncovering the darkness that many want to forget, but we will never allow it to fade.